I am joined now by a couple of political science professors that you have heard on the radio before, who always bring an informed and interesting perspective. Professor Joel Ostrow is with Benedictine College. He's an expert on Russia. And our other good friend, Bill Muck, who is with North Central College in Naperville. We had an interesting discussion on November 5th, which seems like about 10 years ago today. Gentlemen, welcome to both of you. I hope you are doing well.
I'm surprised you're having us back.
Hey,
well, I do want to say something right now. During the course of this hour, you may find it very difficult to understand what I'm saying because periodically my head just flops down onto my desk and I cannot lift it back up. So if all of a sudden I start to sound like I'm just mumbling, just assume that I'm having another one of my little spells, and the two of you, you just take it away.
Yeah, because we know what we're talking about.
Let's start, if you guys don't mind, by going through some of the people who are going to be very shortly in power and get your take on things. First of all, the Senate voted John Thune, Mitch McConnell's right-hand man, into the Senate leadership position. He didn't necessarily promise that he would allow recess appointments, but he told Donald Trump he would absolutely consider recess appointments. He also has, in the past, disagreed with Trump. What do we think of John Thune? Bill, you want to start?
Sure. I mean, I guess it's a sign that the Senate is not fully willing to get behind the MAGA approach, right? I mean, I think he is a reflection of kind of the old school Senate Republicans and, a Mitch McConnell guy. So I think that's interesting. I'm sure behind the scenes, Trump is putting a lot of pressure to have, Scott or somebody that would be more tightly knit with Donald Trump. But the idea that they're even entertaining recess appointments should terrify us. Like the backbone of a good democracy is having a legislature that checks the executive branch, and this is something throughout history that we've seen. They have a constitutional role to advise and consent and to look at these candidates, and if they walk away from it, it's a real problematic sign for a legislative branch.
Well, that's kind of what Rachel Maddow said on Monday night, that this was the beginning of Donald Trump trying to assert that the executive branch is more powerful than the other two branches of our government. And the first way to do that is to say to senators, I know that you'll approve anybody I want, but let's not even bother with that. You just go home and let me do what I want. Joel, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with anything that Bill said. My only, I would probably reframe it in a more general point. We, media, commentators, have had too willing a tendency to accept the new as normal. And I don't know that there are any, on the Republican side, any old school senators left. And Thune might be older than, say, Josh Hawley or Ted Cruz, but he's very much part of the McConnell and really Gingrich Republican members of Congress, and I expect that he will simply do whatever the President Trump demands. I don't expect any resistance by the Republicans, which means that the Senate, let's not underestimate the significance of them giving up their advise and consent role. That is the primary senatorial check on executive branch power.
Well, that's
And
why
if
I
they
wonder
willingly
what
cede
John
it-
Thune's going to do, because, he comes out of the Mitch McConnell school of the Senate is the Senate, and we control the Senate, and we tell the Senate, well, Mitch McConnell certainly told the Senate, which way to vote and which things to support and which things not to support. And Thune was his right-hand man. So I think, as opposed to Rick Scott, who at this point is little more than a sock puppet for Donald Trump, I think the fact that the senators voted in John Thune maybe should send a message to Donald Trump that they're not going to completely roll over 100%, or am I just looking at the bright side here?
I think you're looking for hope where it doesn't exist.
Oh, poop. Yeah. That's my fear. Well, at least we have Matt Gaetz as Attorney General, guys. I mean, come on. If we can't count on...
That'll be the test, won't it, Bill? That'll be the test. If the Senate confirms or allows that in a recess appointment, that there is no longer a legislative branch, that the White House controls all policy in the country.
Yeah.
I think Joel is absolutely right on that. The Matt Gaetz one, it's hard for me to be shocked by anything Donald Trump does, but when that just broke, I don't know when that was, like within the last hour, I literally couldn't believe it. I'm like, there's no way he's going to do that because it's so irresponsible. And you're right. This is the fundamental test for Senate Republicans. If they have any spine, if they have any belief that they actually play a role in reviewing executive branch officials, they have to step in and they say this is not possible. It sort of shocks the conscience that Trump would intentionally do that, and I think it sends a signal to say this is where he wants to go with future appointees in such an important position as Attorney General. Really, really terrifying.
To me, the shock would be if they do oppose, because at this point, look, Mitch McConnell voted not to convict after January 6th. At this point, any pushback by Republican officials on anything that Trump asks is a surprise. We need to shift our focus, and I could not possibly disagree more with every single word of your last caller in your last segment. There wasn't a single word of his that made sense to me. We are in a different world right now. Trump has unchecked power, as does President Biden, based on the Supreme Court's last ruling. But it's not just Gaetz. Kristi Noem, as Department of Homeland Security, she is supremely unqualified. Tulsi Gabbard, as Director of National Intelligence, puts us back in a pre-9/11 world in terms of the intelligence community.
And also, because she is, like Donald Trump, very close to Putin, I mean, is our intelligence apparatus going to really trust her with any information that she could pass along to Putin?
Right.
I can't imagine.
No experience running a big bureaucracy, right?
Well, I think that's such an important point. No experience, right? So whether we're thinking about, we're at defense, the DNI, Attorney General, very little experience. Security clearances. I can't imagine Tulsi Gabbard is going to pass a security clearance. So then you've got high-ranking officials who are going to try to prevent her from getting access to information. It's so problematic. And maybe the hope is, maybe Thune is thinking like, there's no way we can have hearings, because if we have hearings, all of these things will be exposed. They'll have to answer these hard questions. Gaetz will have to answer questions about previous investigations. Tulsi will have to talk about her connections with Russia. So maybe they go with the recess appointments just to avoid the scrutiny of these terrible picks. Yeah.
Charlie Sykes wrote about Marco Rubio being appointed Secretary of State, that the reason, some Republicans are like, oh my God, at least one person who has a semblance of normality. But Charlie Sykes was like, guys, he picked Marco Rubio because he has crushed him before. Marco Rubio is going to be basically a placeholder, a rubber stamp for anything that comes out of the White House, and everybody knows it. So.
100% agree. The only two appointees right now who have experience, like you can say, okay, I can kind of sort of maybe see this person in that position, is Ratliff at CIA and Waltz at NSA. And neither of them have palatable policy positions, but at least they have some connection to the job that they've been appointed to. None of the others do.
Oh, so you don't think being a Fox cable weekend host qualifies you to be Secretary of Defense? Is that what you're saying, Mr. Ostrow? I mean, come on.
Or somebody who believes Palestinians are not people, being the ambassador to Israel, or the Middle East envoy who is a golf partner who essentially also doesn't believe that Palestinians are human.
This is the problem when you're appointing people based on loyalty, right? I mean, you think about in the past, it has been, there's a sort of a general bipartisan approach to say that you have to have people with some experience, and you may not agree with them ideologically, but they've run things either in the corporate world or in the government. They've had some experience overseeing.
Right.
This is an entirely new group that has no experience doing that, and it'll show, right? I mean, especially if Trump comes in and is going to try to get rid of high-ranking officials and some of what he calls the deep state. I mean, there's just going to be no expertise left. And again, these people do real jobs. So it's going to be a shock to the system once they've got the levers of power. Again, it just sort of shocks the conscience that I didn't think that could happen, Joan, but it's happening.
But Bill,
and before anyone says that Kristi Noem is a governor, but DHS has, I think it's 10 times more employees than the state that she presides over. She has no experience with an organization the size of DHS or the budget the size of DHS or really the complexity and importance of the things that it's for which it's responsible. But
I don't think really either of you guys is acknowledging the fact that Pete Hegseth, he used to write a newsletter.
Yeah.
He wrote a newsletter, so there's that. I mean, come on.
I'll be curious to see how these organizations respond to these leaders, right? Because the Defense Department, it's arguably the largest company in the world, and there are people who believe in that and believe what they're doing, and people who've devoted their careers to that. I will be really sort of curious to see how that establishment responds to somebody who comes in and says we're going to get rid of the woke and all of that sort of stuff. Because I think the U.S. military has pride in what it does and thinks it's the best in the world, and to have somebody come in who's been openly critical of all of the leadership there. I think that's going to be a difficult transition just at a sort of personal level to have somebody with that type of tone coming into the high-ranking position.
Oh, throughout the government, it's going to be difficult, Bill, right?
Yes, absolutely.
All of these positions, with the possible exception maybe of CIA. Maybe. We'll have to see how Ratliff is. But I wouldn't want to be in DHS right now. I wouldn't trust it. You're right about the Pentagon. Director of National Intelligence has a role over CIA and NSA. It's going to be, and this is precisely why Trump has selected these people. He's a chaos leader. And a destroyer, and these are people who are all dedicated to chaos and destruction.
Yeah. We need to take a break. I'm talking to political science professors Joel Ostrow from Benedictine University and William Muck from North Central College in Naperville. We have so much to talk about. We'll get back to it right after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
North Central College political science professor William Muck and Benedictine University political science professor Joel Ostrow are here with me. One appointment we have not touched on is Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy as the Department of Government Efficiency, something that has been invented for them. Charlie Sykes, in his Substack today, quoted Mike Murphy, who has this prediction about how Elon Musk is going to function in this effort to find government efficiency. Announcement with great fanfare. They get nice offices. Painful discovery. Federal government doesn't work like a hedge fund or a startup. Painful discovery number 2. 75% of federal spending is basically on autopilot. Epic squabbling with agencies, Congress, White House. Point 6, Elon gets bored. Susie Wiles kills it off. Joel, do you see that happening?
No.
Why not?
Again, nothing will surprise me. So Sykes is talking about what is. It strikes me as a lack of imagination. And so we have to assume that the purpose is to, in fact, carry out much of the Project 2025 agenda, which is to slash the size to get rid of the Department of Education, get rid of the Department of Energy, get rid of half of the agents in the FBI, probably in the IRS, and we can expect Musk in particular, and probably everyone under the two of them, to take actions that will serve to enrich themselves. What if Musk spent something like $100 million and has already made $70 billion since Election Day? So that's what they're after, and that's what they'll do is shape policy in their own self-interest. I don't know if you agree with that, Bill, but I'd be surprised if it were anything else.
Yeah, I think that grift is, we should think about the whole Trump administration, but these two in particular, as grift is driving this, right? They're thinking about their own self-interest. And this is all the more reason why Elon should never be near anything like this. He's got billions and billions of dollars tied up in government contracts between the satellites and the SpaceX stuff. He should not have any role overseeing that process. It should be a clear conflict of interest, and in another political world it absolutely would be. And again, the irony of government efficiency and hiring two people to coach, it's all of it is sort of laughable. I am curious to see whether they have no mandated power, right? Most of this stuff would have to go through the legislature, so I'm sort of curious what that's all going to look like, if they're just going to make recommendations or how that all of their recommendations will be implemented. I guess that's my biggest concern at this point.
Well, one of the other newsletters that I read pointed out that Elon Musk is every bit the narcissist Donald Trump is, and there's only room for one narcissist in chief, and that they didn't go into detail. But they quoted sources as saying that it's possible that the bromance is already starting to lose a little bit of its luster, with some people saying that Elon has overstayed his welcome at Mar-a-Lago. I can't see the two of these guys. They both want to be top dog. They both are convinced they are top dog. And I think Elon might have some idea that somehow he can manipulate Trump. And I don't know. If he's going to do that, he better do it very carefully so that Trump doesn't have any idea what's going on. I just don't see that bromance continuing.
Time will tell, right? If the things that Musk is doing serves to further enrich Trump and his family, like Bill put it, it seems like grift is way high up the list of priorities.
Yeah. One thing I'll be curious about is once, at some point somebody's, some magazine's going to run an image of Donald Trump with, Elon behind being the puppet master.
Yeah.
And we know that we saw throughout the first Trump presidency, anytime anybody came and was seen as a bigger figure, Trump took offense to that. So I'm like you, Joan. I know that grift is really important, and Trump will be looking to maximize in all of this, but he also cares about how he looks. And if it appears that somebody is more powerful than Trump, I wouldn't expect that to be good for the relationship. So
exactly,
we're both so combustible. So we'll see. But is greed more? What's better, narcissism or greed? Which one wins out? That'll be the question.
And if somebody
it also
does
depends
publish
how X messages for Trump, right? Like what's the expectation of the relationship there? So
yeah, but he's already in office. He doesn't need that so much anymore. That's not as big a boost for him anymore. And I think sooner or later somebody is going to put out that picture of Elon Musk, managing the strings of Donald Trump. And what happens to their relationship after that is how good is Elon Musk going to be at groveling and telling Trump it's not true and of course not? And I don't know. The Elon Musk I've read about has a very strong sense of self. And I don't know. I mean, he's the richest guy in the world. How much richer does he want? How many more yachts can you buy?
He also wants power. That's clear. So you are right that I think he sees himself in the role of dictator of America, and who knows what game he's playing on that score, and much will depend on how much Trump is able to destroy, I guess, if he does have broader ambitions. But
we don't have time to get into this. But in the next half hour of our discussion, I do want to talk about what you guys see for Ukraine, the Middle East, the relationship with China, Taiwan, and if it is, and I have a longer list, if we get through those, of maybe what the final question will be for each of you as we wrap up our hour. Do we just let it happen? This is what the voters asked for. This is what the voters want. Maybe we sit back, and if there's mass deportations, if there's another Muslim ban, if there's family separation, maybe we have to let people understand what they voted for. That'll be our final wrap-up question. Okay, now I know you both have taken copious notes. You're getting ready. So we are going to take a break, and when we come back, political science professor Bill Muck from North Central College in Naperville, political science professor Joel Ostrow from Benedictine University. We are going to talk about what they see happening with the war in Ukraine, the Middle East, and the relationship with China. Just to let you guys know, one of my callers at the beginning of the show, he was out somewhere and he was being waited on by some apparently very nice 30-something young woman, and they started talking about the election, and she said that she apparently voted for Donald Trump, and one of the reasons she voted for Donald Trump was she felt that if Kamala Harris were president, this conflict in Ukraine might continue, it might grow larger, whereas if she voted for Donald Trump, he said that he was going to wrap things up, he was going to bring this conflict to an end. We are going to have a discussion about this when we come right back in a minute.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
And I am joined by two of my favorite political science professors, Bill Muck from North Central College in Naperville and Joel Ostrow from Benedictine University. Let us start with the war in Ukraine. At least one person who voted for Trump did so because they felt he was the guy to bring this conflict to an end. Bill, what do you think about that?
Well, I think there's a major difference between campaigning and governing, right? And so Trump can talk a good game about ending things on day one, but governing is much more difficult. And, I mean, if there was an easy solution, it is likely that Biden would have found it. I mean, I think one of the legacies of the Biden administration is going to be how hard they worked behind the scenes, how hard and how good they were at diplomacy. But sometimes, parties don't want to resolve a conflict. So Trump is going to find out on day one that it is much, much more difficult to deal with this situation. I think it is very, very likely that this conflict continues, and he's not going to have a solution, an easy solution, even if he wants to bring the two parties together. So those voters who believed that line, I think they're quickly going to realize that there was no truth to that.
Joel?
I agree in part. The main problem is that I don't see that Russia has any incentive to negotiate at all now. And moreover, I don't see that Russia has any incentive to scale back its operations. And then the flip side of that is I find it much more difficult for Ukraine to secure particularly the air defense weapons that it needs going forward. Where's the evidence that the Congress under the Republicans will sustain funding for Ukraine, particularly when Trump has really gone out and publicly opposed it? And really the entirety of the team around him, with the exception of Rubio, has opposed continued strong funding for Ukraine.
Well, Mike Johnson supported funding for Ukraine. Mitch McConnell supported funding for Ukraine. I haven't seen a position given yet by Thune, but if he was Mitch McConnell's right-hand guy, you'd think that maybe on this issue they might be in some kind of alignment. Do you think maybe cooler heads might just tell Donald Trump, look, right now Ukraine is a hot potato. Just, focus on other things and we'll see how this unfolds. And what was the deal with this apparent phone call? Oh, there was a phone call. And Donald Trump told Vladimir Putin, don't expand the war in Ukraine. And then within 12 hours, it was like, oh, yeah, that didn't happen. We told you it happened, but it didn't happen. There wasn't a phone call.
And Mike Johnson he'll lose his speakership if he comes out in support of funding.
Supposedly, in the private internal meeting that's happening today, the far right is going to tell Johnson that they are going to field a candidate against him in January.
Yeah. And Ukraine's real problem is, what's going to happen to NATO and to Europe if the Trump agenda, becomes real and America sort of withdraws from the world, imposes tariffs, and just punts on our global leadership, in particular towards Ukraine. They don't have the capacity to both arm themselves and arm Ukraine. And their priorities will be either to protect Europe or to protect themselves separately if their politics swing far right as ours have. So that's my word, is an unraveling.
Exactly. And you're already seeing Poland express some real concerns, right? Yeah. Poland is turning to the rest of the Europe and say, we can't count on the United States anymore. Right. We need to think about our own collective self-defense. We need to think about raising funds for Ukraine, if at all possible. So, no, I think there's a sense of panic across Europe that U.S. leadership is gone. The one thing I will say that, presidents don't like to lose wars. And so if the United States, if Trump pulls complete support from Ukraine, it is likely that Ukraine will at least partially lose this war. And that sort of shocks me that Republicans would be okay with that. I mean, we think about the reaction to the bad ending in Afghanistan. That's bad politics to lose a war. Usually you're better off kicking the can down the road, leaving an unpopular war for another president. So I think that's one variable that Trump hasn't fully considered. Losing the war in Ukraine is probably not good for the party.
Or they'll say, look, we won. We stopped the funding as we promised. And who cares about Ukraine? See, they don't matter. The United States still exists. They'll proclaim victory.
Joel, you said when we were talking on Election Day that you thought that if Donald Trump got reelected, that it might cause the European Union to decide that maybe they need to create their own military, since apparently we were not going to be a partner that they could count on. Do you still think that?
Yeah, it's for exactly the reason that Bill identified. But here's the wild card. So Poland wants Europe to stay united in the face of America's withdrawal and to have a collective European military. But the problem is Germany's government collapsed, and they're facing elections probably in January. And I would anticipate that the extreme right will do very well, if not able to form a government, to be part of a government. And that does not bode well for European unity. The repercussions of how the United States, as I put it, the United States leads whether we want to or not, and it looks like we're leading towards an unraveling of support for international institutions and cooperation. How far that goes, we have no idea, but I think the bellwether of that will be this first election in Germany. We don't know the date of it yet.
Interesting. Okay, well, let's set Ukraine aside. Let's turn our attentions to the Middle East. In Michigan, we saw a huge turnout for Jill Stein. Arab Americans had said that they were going to register a protest vote, which could very well be what they did there. But I was always puzzled by, you can be upset with Joe Biden. You can think he didn't do enough. You can think Kamala Harris hasn't set herself apart. You can want to send a protest vote. But when you know that protest vote is going to be somebody who has basically said, Netanyahu wants to bulldoze the country, that's okay with me, I don't see how you rationalize that. Was it just a question of short-term satisfaction over a long-term pain? What do you guys think? Bill, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think my sense is a lot of those voters may come to regret that vote because we just in the early stages, appointing Mike Pompeo, Trump's language, it is very, very clear that the Trump administration is going to fully enable Netanyahu to do whatever he likes, both in Gaza, but now in the West Bank, right? That's the sort of language that should rattle a lot of us. They're talking about annexing parts of the West Bank, and the international community has largely turned against Israel for its conduct in Gaza, so they don't have anybody else to alienate. So they may say this is our time to sort of settle these issues and let's grab our territory. And I think this is just devastating for the Palestinians. So Trump has a very clear vision for what he wants to do in the Middle East, and that's empower Israel, provoke tensions with Iran. I mean, it does feel like a much different moment than when Trump came in 2016. When he came in office in 2016, the international system was relatively stable. That's not the case now, and maybe the most precarious spot might be the Middle East itself.
Yeah. Thoughts, Joel?
Bill, you meant Mike Huckabee, not Pompeo, of course.
I'm sorry, Mike Huckabee. There's too many Mikes. Yeah. That's right. Right, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
So as far as the voters, there are two types. There are the 2024 equivalent of the Bernie whiners from 2016, and that's probably largely the numbers that stayed home or voted for Stein. And those are the ones who were, chanting Genocide Joe and that garbage, and refused to recognize the pressure that this administration's put on Israel, insufficient, but still more than any other president, and the progress towards Palestinian autonomy and statehood. But be that as it may, the other type, and probably more significant in Michigan, was a vote that had nothing to do with Palestine and everything to do with support for LGBTQ community, for those kinds of for choice, which conservative Muslim populations, like conservative religious populations all over, have opposed. So that's the first segment. And the second is, and this is really terrifying for Jews around the world, Jewish people around the world. Ultimately, Israel is responsible for what Israel does. The United States is not committing genocide in Israel, in Gaza, if genocide is happening. The United States is not committing the war crimes. Israel is. We're aiding and abetting, but Israel is still the one that's committing them. And all signs point to increased illegal settlements, increased Israeli action in Gaza, West Bank, maybe even occupation of West Bank, and in Lebanon. And the backlash against the Jewish community here in the United States and worldwide will follow from those additional crimes and horrors. And that will leave the latent and active anti-Semitic crowd on left and right in this country to explode and around the world. And so you might see real ugly coming from that, and that is terrifying and has ample precedent in history. I think the Jewish population all over the world and in this country should be very wary.
We need to take a break, guys. I'm talking to political science professor Joel Ostrow and political science professor Bill Muck. We're going to be right back after this.
Get social with WCPT 820 and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WCPT 820. This is Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
We are having a discussion. Political science professor Joel Ostrow, political science professor Bill Muck from Benedictine University and North Central College, respectively. I want to talk about China. Donald Trump made China his enemy. You know, he was going to bring China to its knees in his previous administration, and has shown no real love of what's going on over there in his campaign. Do you think we are going to have a real adversarial relationship with China in the at least initial years of the Trump administration? Bill, you want to start with that?
Sure. I think one of the more, there are a lot of ways in which Biden, Trump, and Harris had very, very divergent foreign policies. But one of the areas where you saw significant overlap was China. Trump, went with the trade wars, a much more confrontational approach with China. And Biden, to some degree, not exactly, but to some degree, mimicked that and kept some of the tariffs in place. And I think there's a general agreement among Democrats and Republicans that we should be more hawkish on China. And so I expect that. But I don't expect, with Biden, there was at least somewhat of a coherence to how you think about China. It was about building alliances in the region. Biden, I think, was very careful about saying it's important that we build relationships with countries in the Pacific so we can balance against China. Trump has no interest in doing that. Trump is all about, America alone and America, separate from everybody else. So that makes that job more difficult. The other weird angle to Trump is everything is so transactional. So if President Xi comes out and says he's open to some sort of deal, Trump is likely to engage in that. So I don't know what exactly we're going to see between Trump and China. I'm guessing it's going to sort of be up and down, maybe similar to like the North Korean dynamic. But I don't expect to see a coherent and consistent U.S. foreign policy that's premised on the idea of let's reach out and build alliances to balance against China. So, again, more chaos and I think dysfunction than anything else.
Joel?
I agree with all of that. I would only add, just in terms of style, President Biden and the people around him have vast experience in foreign policy and diplomacy and understand nuance and understood that you can use bombast when it comes to Russia. But bombast does not work with President Xi in China, and so the adversarial relationship was much quieter and built on a hope for diplomacy and maybe finding a way towards, a thawing of relations. Trump and the people around Trump, particularly when it comes to China, are unrestrained in their bombast and their rhetoric, and that has not and will not play well with President Xi and China, and so I don't see much hope for a warming of relations. And then it would be surprising if some dramatic imposition of tariffs on China did not happen. And the repercussions from that are really, economists have made quite clear that they will be devastating. And I don't know that anyone really knows exactly how bad, but it would be bad.
Well, Elon Musk has already suggested that any chip manufacturing that is currently located in Taiwan should be rapidly moved over to Vietnam, which doesn't seem to bode well for perceived support going forward for Taiwan. Bill, what do you think?
That's, again, it's Elon showing how silly he is, right? This is not possible. It's not like you can just pick up those factories and move, right? This is the thing, and people oftentimes miss this about Taiwan. The most sophisticated chips that Taiwan is doing, that is what is enabling the U.S. military to continue to be the most sophisticated, the most advanced. Like, if you want to talk about the military gap and power and whatnot, that is a central role. And the U.S. relationship with Taiwan is so central. And again, it's part of the reason China wants Taiwan back. And so the idea that you can just shift and move that really does show how naive. I know Elon likes playing, president and all those sort of things, but this is why you want people who know what they're talking about, people who have some experience. And I guess Joan, it's really frustrating listening to these guys sometimes.
Yeah. And not just military build, right? Like the chips that go in automobiles. It's not that long ago, you know, during the pandemic when it was there were long waits to get used cars, much less new cars. There was a real shortage, and certainly that would be one of the consequences, and dramatic inflation really on all electronic goods would result because the disruption would be massive.
Bill, you sent me an article, a link to an article from the Financial Times that was kind of looking at what this election meant, you know, why it happened. Would you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. This was, you know, as Joel and I are political scientists, so we're looking for patterns and data. And I've been frustrated because I get that Democrats are frustrated with the loss, but all of the finger pointing, and it's, okay, this is, you know, Kamala was too woke. She wasn't woken up. She was too centrist. She didn't, you know, all the, you know, didn't like the working class or love the working class, all of those things. But this data point from the Financial Times goes further than anything else I've seen explaining what happened in the election. And they looked at all of the, like, basically going back over the last 100 years, and the percentage of the incumbent, so the party that was in power, did they gain or lose seats? Did they stay in power, or did they get knocked out of power? And this is the first time in the last 50 plus years, maybe even longer than that, that every advanced developed democracy that has had an election this year, nobody has grown seats. Like, everybody has been knocked down. And I mean, as an example, you can think about the United Kingdom, you know, where that the conservatives were knocked out of power. And it doesn't matter if you're left or right, but this moment in history was one of the most anti-incumbent moments we've seen maybe in the history of democracy. And so as we think about what happened to Harris and the Harris campaign, she was going against headwinds that we've never seen before. So it's easy to sort of look internally and say Harris should have done this or done that, but it's possible and maybe even likely that the largest factor explaining what happened on Election Day was that the anti-incumbent wave just whacked Kamala Harris, and it would have whacked any Democrat in that position. And I think it helps us sort of put broader perspective on what played out there, which isn't to say other factors didn't matter. You know, I think race and gender played a big role, but this may be one of the most central factors in helping us understand what happened on Election Day.
And really one of the most puzzling things, Bill, is, and I don't know the results going back in time, but my sense is that the Harris campaign did not know how to respond to deal with the fundamental disconnect between how people felt about the economy and what all of the indicators were showing about the economy. And I'm not talking about the Dow, the level of the stock market, or GDP. I'm talking about increase in median income outpacing inflation for 24 months in a row, I believe it was, leading up to the election. People, in fact, their purchasing power, their incomes, median level income, not talking about the top 1% who were still making disproportionately more, and inequality is still growing. But the median income was outpacing inflation, and yet people felt the opposite. And messaging on that is really, really hard. And that's something that was unusual, because normally when people's pocketbooks are better off for 2 years straight, the party in office increases seats.
Yeah.
So this was, and that was really an insurmountable. Well, maybe not insurmountable, but they couldn't figure out how to message it and never approached it effectively.
I heard some people say that one of the things that Bill Clinton was brilliant about was making sure that the common man knew that the economy was great and that he was responsible, that he would wander into the press room. You know, he would be like, you know, he would talk to anybody who would listen. Hey, great economy. I did that, you know, and that maybe, you know, we didn't really get much talk about that kind of thing. I mean, Joe Biden, what is it? Once in his presidency, he walked into the press office and actually decided to speak to the reporters there. You know, I mean, would it have been different if Joe Biden had Bill Clinton's skill set?
It's possible. And think about, go back to Donald Trump. Every day during the Trump presidency, he talked about the stock market. And there are many measures to the economy, but he would go out there. And so he created this alternative reality about the economy. And Biden just isn't that kind of president. He isn't that kind of person. But it may suggest that that's what you need to do, right? Especially with an American public which is not savvy, is not paying attention to the news or, details. You may have to create the vibes that will get them to vote for you, even if it is disconnected to reality. Joan, it's a bit of an indictment on the American public as well that they can have that much of a misreading of the economic data.
Yeah,
and really all you heard from Harris was but wait, the economy is doing better. And not enough of, it's not doing good enough because the top 0.1, 1/10 of 1%, right? And when she was talking about going after, what was it? What's the phrase? Not price. Well, price gouging. That didn't come out. She needed to kind of give the Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren message on, we are going to go after the monopolies that are making your lives too expensive and miserable, robbing us of competition, and given some examples even, which would have been risky, but, that's what I kept waiting for, was that kind of message, that the Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders message, which I do believe would have resonated with people saying, okay, this is the economic change that we want, not tariffs that are going to,
Okay,
people
guys.
are looking for something different.
If you want to just do a yes or no here, but we're going to wrap up with, do we sit back and let the worst happen? Joel Ostrow, you're starting.
What? I can't hear you. What?
Yeah.
What? Are you still there?
Come on. Come on.
Sitting back is really, really hard, and it also seems to be what the momentum is. I think there's despondence by some and fear by others. There's a feeling of helplessness, and I don't think anyone's really figured out how to overcome that yet.
Okay, Bill?
I totally agree with what Joel's saying, but I still believe in the power of ideas. And even if it's pointless, I still think you got to get out there and you got to push back. You got to continue to engage, right? So I think we can do both things. I think Trump is going to do what Trump is going to trump, and it's going to be very unsuccessful. And it's important that others are making the case for why these are bad ideas. So I still believe in the power of discourse and ideas.
Keep on trucking, Joan. You play an important role.
Well, my feeling is that we have to kind of pick and choose. We don't have enough people. Yeah. We don't have enough energy to fight every single thing. And I think people have to pick and choose the causes that they believe most in and really be ready to go to the mat for that. I'm ready to go to the mat for Social Security. I'm ready to go to the mat for Medicare. I'm ready to go to the mat for the Affordable Care Act. And my list goes on a little longer. But not all of us can do everything all the time, and I think we're going to have to pick and choose. And how is that for a careful answer, my friends? Okay.
Well done.
Bill Muck, Joel Ostrow, we've got to do this again. This was great and interesting and fun. Thank you both very, very much.
Thanks, Joan.
Thank you, Joan.